Hi, this is author-philosopher Ronald E. Springer of EthicsUnderground.com here to continue the reading of Moral Armor, Chapter 8, Part 13, Exoskeletal Frames of Reference. Please hit like and subscribe before we dive in. With a world of proof to the contrary, the fear-driven exist as the only beings who see fit to consider the idea of their own universal impotence as a plausible and acceptable natural condition. Accepting his consciousness as imaginary and the whole of the world to be an indeterminate flux, he causes and reinforces his own sterility. By sidelining existence and consciousness, he feels no grounding and seeks to steady his feet with the rules, conditions, and unquestionable authority of others. With his outer world as formless as his inner world, he needs something of substance, a hard outer shell to handle what he cannot deal with independently. Since by his own estimation, nothing inside his skull is of any use, external frames of reference replace his middle cognitive actions, identification and the creative actions of mind. His ideal, fervently pursued with a vigor to match ours, is to successfully remove choice from his life. If the choices are made for him by a source that can neither be doubted nor questioned, then the responsibility has been shifted, and in his mind, he has won his security. But the desire to negate choice is the inadvertent desire to wipe out morality. By attempting it, he is cut off from all the benefits which only moral action can provide: pride, confidence, enjoyment, and love. Crutches are temporary supports for a weakness to be discarded upon attainment or recovery of independent action. In physical life, crutches are sound, but in the realm of intellectual weakness, they are often dishonest. They exist not to help, but to take over. Acquiring strength and skill, and then moving on is a part of growth. Relinquishing control is not. For the fear-driven, crutches are not temporary, but a permanent scaffolding for a building that never gets completed, though it is certainly finished. The extent to which he clings to others is the extent of his own confusion and fear in each context of life. In the act of rejecting his own judgment at any level, he abandons his only internal frame of reference for the collective and unquestionable code of conduct. He then filters his own actions by their expectations to assure compliance, as self-esteem now comes from the outside in the form of approval or conformity. Improper emphasis is now on the good opinion of others, which is the consideration of non-essential values as if they were essential. Fear-driven man ignores existence and uses men as the means of perception to draw his metaphysical conclusions, which leads him to treat irrational filters also as a means of perception. Others become his eyes and ears, and their false frames become his track to run on. The most timid and basic social subordination is to fear the power of another's consciousness, and others are the first false frame he finds. We've all known people with so loose a grasp on their own rationality, so easily spooked, that they can be stopped by saying, "If you read that or listen to that music, you'll go to hell." They give you the deer in the headlights look, which transforms into the primitive terror of expecting some mystical force to descend upon them. To a human being with full control of consciousness, it is truly humiliating to witness. As one must accept or reject a premise to determine one's moral stand, dropping their rationality negates their very moral responsibility. By turning into a nobody to avoid the incomprehensible retribution of displeasing and unknowable power, they become a pawn of evil to be steered, and they asked for it. Those who side with evil are only those who submit their minds. Other people are the foundation from which all other false frames spring. Others sell him the second false frame in all its forms, faith. As rational validation is inherently processed by him as a threat anyway, he is offered faith as a replacement for reason as driver. Religious, social, or otherwise, he simply tells himself that the thinking has been done for him and can be safely relied on. There is no need to confirm it, and no need to delve into its motivations. It only need be accepted without question for it to work. Not to actually work, but to replace discipline with submission as the means, and to replace confidence with approval as the end. People will accept him, and he gets rewards for taking one step closer to his automatic ideal, subjugating the painful process of thought. As he grows, more frames follow, some valid, some not, but none are rationally meant to replace his own judgment. Fear-driven man doesn't see it that way. To him they are a chauffeur, an excuse, a defense, an identity, a fall guy, and an alibi. Whether it is a popular culture, peers, school, elders, authorities, political parties, or unions, he just desires anyone who will tell him what to do and grant him the positive view of himself which his own sense of justice denies him. Exoskeletal frames of reference attempt to replace the internal frame that guides a being throughout its life, a process that can only remain fixed in the fundamental tools of its accomplishment, tools to be used alone. Late teens to early 20s are particularly crucial, as youth are seeking a foundation from which to launch into their futures. The lure of unearned rewards is strong at this stage, especially to those with a great deal of uncertainty in the quest for independence, vulnerable to the organized immorality which is in place against them. The fear-driven longing and angst to avoid the necessity to operate their cognitive functions are given an out by such social framework. They welcome it. Formal education can be valuable, but not as a pattern for living. They teach conformity and obedience, not the structure of thought. Their hallmark is memorization, and merit is defined not by individual ability, but often by the quality of individual pretense. False frames don't require judgment and actually discourage it. If you realize all the students must see through before they can view the world itself, religious doctrines, family obligations, collective requirements, educational, peer and authoritarian pretenses, social pressures, to be moral becomes to be without mind, without independence, and without sovereign identity. They end up with layer after layer of rules and regulations for living that so obscure and inhibit reality, they can barely function. Stacked one after another directly in front of their vision, the weight of the burden is too great, and the decisions of their lives can no longer be managed. False frames are like Coke bottle glasses over 20/20 vision. Around false framers, you will find yourself stopped, trapped, your dreams and desires halted by senseless limitations and required obedience to irrational demands. Their frames withhold the dissemination of knowledge to cause timidity. They then attempt to rule the minds of others, the mind they fear and know not how to use. To interpose one's judgment with that of others is to violate the nature of the entity, to suspend and restrict his tools of survival, and to leave him defenseless. Self-made man saw this coming and knocked them all aside. He wouldn't let anything stand in the way of the world and his view of it. We don't jump through hoops, we find our own way, practicing no formality beyond a strict intellectual discipline. Our minds must remain free to function, and our bodies must remain free to act on our reasoning power. Self-made man designs his own filters to sift his affairs. He decides whether or not he agrees with prevailing principles, and regardless, chooses the path to life. He builds structures which allow the greatest number of options to remain open, accepting nothing that replaces cognitive action or inhibits the process. He makes sure he has the correct frames for the proper applications. To the extent that outside principles are rational, he respects them. To the extent they are unsound, he seeks to correct them. He is a man. He does not consider himself to be helplessly subject to another's limitations, stupidity, ill will, or parasitism. Frames of reference are not difficult to validate. Rule 1. No frame of reference is valid whose verification of authority lies outside the range of your physical senses, outside of your capacity to define, and outside of your right to question. Since before the Inquisition, to question a moral authority's right to sacrifice your life has been considered heresy. This view has spread to include other hopeful benefactors of homicidal altruistic principles, veiled by the claimed good of a family, the public, a state, or a nation. With their system of morality, they claim physical and spiritual values are only enjoyed if they are destroyed, and then proceed to confiscate your valuables, goals, dreams, money, and privacy, saying it's for your own good. No one holds that right over you, and no one ever will. Rule 2. No frame of reference is valid which relies on maintaining the immeasurable and the indeterminate as its purpose, its technique, its damage, or its reward, while naming a very specific cause, culprit, or benefactor. Cause and effect from purpose to fulfillment must be traceable. For example, faith has always claimed man to be evil by nature, and granted God the esteem of all good, with proof of neither, concluding that man must be stopped. Sacrifice of individuals is a claimed historical necessity of a nation's welfare, for the children's futures, for protection against emerging enemies, for the purity of the Aryan race. No link of supposed cause to desired effect can ever be established. In our first steps of comprehending the enormous cycles of the Earth, man-hating environmental protesters extrapolate straight-line calamity from every measurement taken. If the Earth is cooler, we are headed straight for an ice age, and it's man's fault. If it's warmer, we are headed straight for an inferno, and again, it's man's fault. Supposedly intervening to save this fragile planet, it isn't the problems they wish to solve, but the living actions of man they wish to stop. The course of every such crisis shows solutions provided by the men of thought and living action, never by the men of tantrum and demand. Rule 3. A frame of reference must have a valid context based on a human need for the standard, and all must rest on the fundamental axioms of existence and consciousness. Proper frames of reference accent the individual's capabilities. They don't limit him or provoke dependencies. In essence, proper frames not only allow experimentation and discovery of better methods, they sanctify their pursuit. Still, many valid frames have been infused with self-defeating, human-limiting guidelines over the course of history. Capitalism, for one, has been beaten to death by those claiming its attributes to be exactly those of its antithesis, communism. Still, there is no duty required for each of us to approach these realms and sort them all out. It is up to you only to decipher the truths along strains that interest you, to follow what works and to discard the rest. In seeking your highest pride and enjoyment, you will have performed such a purification. Other avenues of life will be cleansed by those whose passion is likewise consumed in them. Putting spirit murderers in their own trap, if we are driven by God, our conditioning, or any other circumstances beyond our control, then our own private interests are the result of that affinity, and our proper course and highest efficiency is to pursue them. That's all for now. Next up is their withered tree. I split these videos up by subject so you'd have a better chance of finding moral armor, and then perhaps go through the whole thing for free. Why? To help create a leader in every life. Sound civilization stair-steps up from sound coherence to sound individual to productive groups of mature individuals. Self-hatred drives fear-driven people in our world to wipe out the individual, so we all need moral armor to protect ourselves and the future of mankind. Click subscribe and leave a thumbs up if you'd like to help wipe out moral confusion fast and make the world a better place.